Isabella's day of reckoning came at Nottingham Castle. She had already become suspicious that her son was beginning to resist her control. So when the royal party took up residence here, they had the guards redoubled about them. But Edward's plans had been well laid. Under cover of darkness, a group of young knights made their way through these secret tunnels into the castle.
Mortimer and Isabella were surrounded before they knew what was happening. Isabella was forced back into her bedchamber, and Mortimer was disarmed and overpowered in a matter of moments. After 3 years, the rule of Isabella and her consort was over.
There was no doubt about Mortimer's fate. He was sentenced to a traitor's death for killing the last king and usurping the power of the new one. He was hanged at Tyburn like a common thief.
More than 20 years of brutal political experience told Isabella that Mortimer's fate was inevitable. But what would hers be? She was, after all, the king's mother. And once Mortimer was dead, the story could be spun that she had been diverted from her royal duty by his machinations. Presumably she mourned for him, but she'd always been a realist, and she took care to leave no public traces of her grief.
Her son might have acted against her because of the way she'd ruled, but Isabella was still his mother. She had to surrender her vast estates, but Edward gave her an income of £3,000 a year. She could no longer intervene in politics, but she would have a sumptuous, if compulsory, retirement.
Isabella had an extraordinary life. She showed for a brief moment that female leadership could represent the legitimacy of the crown forcefully enough to depose an anointed king. But the exercise of power by a woman turned out to be a different matter, and particularly a woman like Isabella, who enriched herself rather than nurturing her people. In retrospect, the death of her husband came to define Isabella not as the saviour of England, but, in the words of the poet Thomas Gray, as the she-wolf of France, with unrelenting fangs that tear'st the bowels of thy mangled mate.
This is how Isabella has been remembered. Certainly, many of her actions were violent and self-serving. But then, so were those of the men around her. And the vitriol heaped on her by history draws on an image of female power as grotesque, savage, and immoral.